Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the On the Diamond and Into the podcast. As always, I am your host, Mahal, and today, on Monday, June 16th, we will be talking on episode 78 of the podcast about the American League All-Star Game and who might represent Seattle at that game. We'll also discuss the Boston Red Sox coming to town this week, and we'll talk about Rafael Devers, as well as the Mariners' sweep of the Cleveland Guardians over the weekend. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, to begin, let's talk All-Star Game. There was the first update today on All-Star ballot voting. Now, as expected, Cal Raleigh is leading catchers by a significant margin. He looks as though he's going to be the starting catcher for the American League. This would be the first time that the Mariners would have the starting catcher at an All-Star Game, which would be pretty freaking awesome. Now, the fact that he's not getting all votes is kind of crazy, but, you can't expect that, obviously. Either way, Cal Raleigh is going to be, first and foremost, the representative for the Seattle Mariners at the All-Star Game. I think the other one that is pretty much a shoo-in, at least at this point, would probably be Andres Munoz. I wanted to look at this a little bit, so we'll talk about it. He's third right now in ERA among relievers in the American League. He's fourth in FWAR, second in saves, and 13th in strikeout percentage. The real only other one that feels like he's a big competition to Munoz is Hader, and usually they have three relievers, so there shouldn't be a whole lot of stress there in terms of anything to me. The only thing that would maybe cause that would be someone weird getting in, and then you look at it's like Josh Hader and Luke Weaver and someone else that's random because a team just needs a random player in and it ends up being a reliever, someone like the White Sox maybe getting a guy. But if I'm looking at it right now, the White Sox are probably getting like a Shane Smith or something like that in, just because they don't have a whole lot. But either way, it seems like Andres Munoz is going to be a representative for the Seattle Mariners at the All-Star Game. He is one of only two relievers in the American League to rank top 4 in the league in ERA, FWAR, and saves. The other one is Hader. So I think you can see pretty clearly those two are probably going to be all-stars. The question is who else? And beyond that, who are the Mariners' other representatives? The two I want to talk about today are, first and foremost, Bryan Woo. But in the biggest way, I want to talk about JP Crawford and why JP Crawford should maybe get in. First, let's talk about Bryan Woo, though. In terms of starters, I wanted to put this into some different groupings on guys that I think will get in. The first group is going to be Tariq Skubal, Hunter Brown, Garrett Crochet, and Max Fried. And I think those 4 guys are shoo-ins to get in. The next group are the guys that are very likely going to get in. And to me, that's Chris Bubic, Framber Valdez, Carlos Rodon, and Jacob deGrom. The only one there that I think maybe not would be Bubic and Rodon. And obviously that's 2 that maybe not. But the reason I say Rodon is just because it would be 2 Yankees, but also the managers and coaches for the American League All-Star team are going to be Yankees. So I think if you know where I'm going with this, there's probably going to be some Yankees in there that maybe you didn't expect to totally be in there. And that also plays into the Luke Weaver thing, who, if he takes a spot from Andres Munoz, it's not going to be wonderful. But I could also totally see that happening because it is Aaron Boone, Yankee legend type of guy, who is going to be in charge of picking some of those pitchers and some of the reserves. And that in itself is like, there's a flaw in the system in terms of all-stars. But you know what? It is what it is. For Wu, I think to get in, you're going to need some big starts. And that starts on Tuesday. He's going to need a good start. He's going to need to start diminishing some of these runs, getting a few more strikeouts. And I think if he can do that, he very well can get in. I don't think this is at all out of reach at any point. I mean, he's probably in the third group after those first two groups that I mentioned. And there will be guys that bow out just because they started right before the All-Star break and they want and need the break. I look at a guy like Jacob deGrom that's probably not going to be pitching. So that's already an empty spot there. I would look at a guy like even a Tariq Skubal, Garrett Crochet, who have both been there before, and they probably also are not going to pitch. Even a Max Fried. These are all guys that, it feels like maybe at some point they're going to get hurt, and you don't want them to be throwing a whole lot more innings than they need to be. Other guys would be even a Framber Valdez. We've seen him not pitch before. Carlos Rodon is coming back from injury as of the beginning of the season, so maybe he's not throwing in. So, the pitching thing it's hard to know because there are so many spots available and so many guys bow out. So there's potential for Wu to get in. I think if you can see him stack a bunch of good starts here as we get closer and closer and closer, then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I can see this guy getting in pretty quickly. Moving on, let's talk about JP Crawford. This is the one that really made me want to talk about this subject at all today. JP Crawford is having an unbelievable season. I don't know if I have talked about it enough. The guy's hitting 296 with a 411 on base, 413 slug, WRC plus of 147, and he is already worth 2.2 wins. Now, the question is, where do these things rank among American League shortstops? And JP Crawford is firmly cemented in top 4 shortstops right now in the American League. And to me, he might even be a top 3 shortstop. Now, in terms of WAR, he's 4th. The guys ahead of him are Bobby Witt, Jacob Wilson, and Jeremy Pena. So he's the 3rd best shortstop in the American League West, and he's maybe the 4th in the American League in general. Now, the guy that is probably going to be competing with JP for that 3rd and final shortstop spot is Bobby Witt Jr. Now, the problem with that is that Bobby Witt Jr. has the name recognition, and he's a very good defensive player. And that's likely why I see him getting this spot. That said, let's run through some stats. Number 1, let's talk about F4. JP's 4th among American League shortstops in F4 at 2.2 wins. Witt is over a win above him at 3.3. Wilson's also at 3.3. Pena's at 3.6. In terms of average, JP ranks 3rd in average, hitting 296. Witt is behind him, about 15 points below him, 17 actually, I think, to be exact. He's hitting 279 on the season. These things can change. Wilson's hitting 367, Pena 325. Wilson and Pena are going to get in. Witt is also very likely going to get in just because of the name, and we've seen that with Julio Rodriguez in the past, and it's going to be probably kind of frustrating. But also you could see maybe one of these guys decide not to play, or maybe I'll give you another option. If you want to keep listening, there is potential for another way for him to get in without it being as a shortstop. In terms of other stats, let's talk on base and slug real quick. On base, JP is 1st. He's the best. He has the best on base percentage among all American League shortstops at 411. Right behind him is Jacob Wilson at 401. Pena is at 379, and Witt ranks 6th at 337. So this is one of those areas where JP is very clearly ahead of Bobby Witt Jr. at this current point in time. On base percentage. This is the stat that I'm going to come back to time and time again because this is what JP Crawford is best at. What he's not so good at is slugging. And that might end up being one of the reasons why he doesn't get in. He ranks 8th in slug, 12th in ISO. Witt is slugging 468, whereas JP is slugging 413. Pena is slugging 485. Wilson, 513. Again, Pena and Wilson are going to get in. We're just going to talk about Witt and JP for the rest of this. In terms of slug, 413 for JP, 468 for Witt. ISO, Witt 189, JP 117. In terms of WRC plus, though, and this is your value in terms of creating runs. This is your value as a hitter. This is what you need to do. What you need to do as a hitter is create runs, and this is your value as a hitter in creating runs. JP Crawford ranks second among American League shortstops in WRC plus. He's tied there with Pena at 147. It has 116. That's about a 30% difference as a hitter. Now, where it evens itself out and why Bobby Witt Jr. ultimately has a full win above JP Crawford is because of defense. Majority of that win is from defense, if not entirely. Because JP's been a better hitter this year. And you can see that from every stat except for slug. And slug's not everything. In terms of being an actual hitter, JP Crawford has been better than Bobby Witt Jr. And for that reason, I think really he should be in the All-Star game. I'm not saying he will be. And I'm not saying that Bobby Witt Jr. maybe necessarily doesn't deserve to be. Because really, I think all four of these guys probably should be All-Stars. Because you look at the second base position, and how can you say that you shouldn't have 4 shortstops and 2 second basemen instead of 3 of each when the guy that should probably be out as a second baseman and the third one in would be Brandon Lau, who is a WRC plus of 116 and has only been worth 1.2 wins. JP Crawford's a full win higher, and his WRC plus is 40% better. Bobby Witt Jr. has the same WRC plus and is 2 wins better than Brandon Lau. Now, I understand that's not necessarily how it works, but maybe it should be because, I mean, you're trying to get the best players on the field. And if that takes you playing one of those guys at second base maybe for an inning or two, so be it. Like, it's the All-Star game. They're not going to rage about that. You're getting into the All-Star game. So if I'm selecting the All-Star reserves, that's probably what I'm doing. Do I have some bias in that? Of course. But at this current moment in time, I think JP Crawford, Bobby Witt Jr., Jeremy Pena, and Jacob Wilson all deserve to be in the American League or in the All-Star game. And those things can change. Stats can change. Someone could get hurt for all we know. But as of right now, all those guys deserve to be in the All-Star game. Moving on, let's talk about the Guardian series very briefly. And we'll talk about really just the past week. Mariners bats have found some form. And while maybe it's not this crazy good form that we're talking about, especially at the beginning of last week, they've been getting a lot of runners on, and they figured out a way to drive those runners in over the weekend, and that's something that they weren't able to do for a while. In terms of what's happened over the past week, JP Crawford, 10 for 22. Julio, 10 for 27 with 3 doubles. Polanco, 7 for 25, and he's starting to hit right-handed and playing the field a little bit. He seems like he's starting to get healthy. Cole Young's 5 for 16 with just 2 strikeouts. His bat's starting to come around. And Zone 5 for 19 with a double, a homer, and 3 walks. Randy Arozarena starting to walk again with 6 over the last week in 27 plate appearances. That's a 22% walk rate. The bats are starting to find some form. That's 6 guys right there out of the 9 in your lineup. And I'm not mentioning a guy in Rowdy Tellez who had 2 homers last week. Bats are finding form. Guys are getting on base. Guys are driving in runners. If you can continue stringing hits together, stringing walks together, all of a sudden you're going to be able to score runs. And the Mariners pitching is starting to finally get healthy. Logan Gilbert starting tonight. Emerson Hancock's been very, very good also, and he had another very, very good start yesterday. Hancock went 7 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. And this team desperately needed a start like that in order to sweep a series when they kind of needed to, because this team needed some wins. They'd gone on a cold streak. They need to get back on a hot streak in order to stay competitive and in order to get the additional support that they need in terms of trades. Because if they're not competitive in a month and a half, then why would Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander trade the future or parts of the future in order to improve the team just this year or just this year and next year? And that starts with a series win, hopefully, against the Boston Red Sox, who come to town after trading their best hitter in Rafael Devers. Now, the question everyone's going to ask is, why the heck did the Boston Red Sox trade Rafael Devers? Did he force his way out? What happened? And it kind of seems like he didn't necessarily force his way out, but it seems like they almost forced him out. which is a little bit weird in a way because just the bat that he is. But that contract, and this guy's still in his prime right now, but 8.5 years left of a $113.5 million deal. I mean, in of itself, that's why the Mariners weren't involved. If you want to know why the Mariners weren't involved, that's right there why. 8.5 years of about 26-ish million a year. Mariners were never going to be involved in that. As frustrating as it is, as it shouldn't be like that. This is an all-star third base bat that can DH for you or play some meh defense at third base. But when there's that much money, they're never going to be involved. How I wanted to think about this in terms of how it affects the Mariners, though, is potential trade possibilities. Are the Red Sox going to start trading more guys? Are they going to go into a sell mode? Are the Giants going to want to add some starters after trading Kyle Harrison, who's been their 5 starter? Do they want a guy like Logan Evans or Emerson Hancock? So I looked at it. Now, what would the Mariners want from these two teams? That's another question, because are there a ton of pieces that the Mariners would necessarily want that either of these teams would be willing to part with? Not exactly. The guy I wanted to look at for the Giants, well, of course, Helio Ramos, Young Hoo Lee, those type of guys, but those guys aren't going to be available very likely. Unless you go trade a big starter, but that's not an in-season trade, that type of thing that happens. So I wanted to look at Wilmer Flores. This is a bat that's been slightly above average with the ability to play first base. He's had a better year this year than last, and before last year, it had an above average bat every year of his career. Now the question is, what would the Giants want? And would they want Logan Evans? And would Logan Evans be too much? And Logan Evans, I think, definitely would be too much. And I'm not saying I would do this trade. You'd need more pieces for sure. But Logan Evans for Wilmer Flores is sort of where I'm starting. Now then, when I dug into it, from the Mariners side, I don't know why you would do this. And then from the Giants side, I don't really know why you would do this. Because you have a lot of AAA MLB ready starters right now, if you're the Giants, that are in your top 5 prospects. I think they have 2 of their top 5 prospects that are starters in AAA right now that are basically MLB ready. So why would you trade for another one of those guys? Doesn't really make any sense. So I don't think this trade makes sense from really either side as I dug more into it. And the Giants don't have a ton of bats that would interest you. And they don't have a ton of bats that are short on control that would interest you, if any. Another guy you could look at is like a Mike Yastrzemski type, but I think due to his age, you're very unlikely to go want to do that. And I also think you're going to favor infield bats. And if you're going to give up value for a guy that's going to go play in the outfield for you, when really you probably just want to go get a first baseman and you can have Victor Robles eventually back out there and Luke Raley for the meantime once he's back in a few weeks, doesn't really make sense. The Red Sox, on the other hand, also don't really make sense. Because the 2 guys for me that I would want from them that would be available would be Tristan Casas, who's hurt, and Wilyer Abreu, who's also now hurt. So it doesn't feel like there's anyone over there that you'd want to trade. And they'd want starters. And at this point in time, the only starter that really you'd want to trade is Bryce Miller, and his value is tanked. So I don't think you'd really want to trade him anyway, unless you're able to get the value that you believe you can get from him. Or for him, I guess is the correct terminology there. So neither of these teams really seem to fit, and I don't think that this trade affects the Mariners in a huge way, other than the fact that they don't have to see Rafael Devers for the next 3 days, and Boston comes to town right after it, and we have to see sort of how they react. Moving on to the series, though, let's talk about the lineup and pen for the Boston Red Sox. I mean, the lineup's a lot less scary without Rafael Devers in it. You can say that much. I mean, the guys I'm going to look at that are sort of that have been dangerous are Abe Toro and Carlos Narvaez. And Narvaez is young, and Abe Toro, how long is that going to stay? I don't really know. The guy that maybe there's a lot of guys, however, though, in that lineup that can be dangerous. And this is the thing that I think you're going to continue to come back to this entire series. Jarren Duran, a guy that's been about 6% above league average at the plate this year, but has a good track record and has the ability to do a lot of damage. Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, Christian Campbell are the other 3 I'm going to look at. These are 3 really young, uber-talented prospects that all 3 of them just came up at the beginning of this year at some point. Anthony was about, I think, last week. He was the best. He's the best prospect in baseball. Number 1 overall prospect in all of baseball. Marcelo Meyer's a top 20, I believe, prospect right now. Campbell is about the same as that. None of these guys have torn the cover off the ball so far. They've all been below league average. Meyer, the closest to the average. Christian Campbell started really hot and has very much so cooled down since then. But these guys are all toolsy. They're all talented. They all have the ability to do damage. And let's keep them away from living up to that hype during this series. Because if they start to find their own, all of a sudden this lineup looks a lot more dangerous. The bullpen for Boston, I don't really know what to think because you hear it as a problem a lot, but they actually have like a few good arms that are I guess I don't want to say good arms because their closers are Aroldis Chapman, and I don't really know what to think of him because he's old and like he's been solid, but like okay, so their bullpen basically doesn't have anyone that scares you. That's the way I'm going to look at it. Bullpen doesn't have anyone that's going to scare you, that's going to strike fear into your bats or anything like that. But it's also not so terribly trash that you're like, we're going to score 8 runs off of this bullpen every night. Get to the bullpen, work the bullpen, get into the bad part of their bullpen, and then we're talking. Again, Aroldis Chapman is the closer for the Red Sox. That's a left-handed pitcher, so you're going to want to have your right-handed hitters available if you're down late in the game, specifically the ones that are going to come off the bench in any given game. You're not going to want to take them out. And I think that's an important point to know and to mention. And I'm going to ask Dan Wilson right now because it's going to come up at some point in the series. Please do not pinch hit Mitch Garver for anyone to face Aroldis Chapman or another lefty in this series. Don't do it, please. I don't want to see it. Game 1, Lucas Giolito on the mound for the Red Sox. That is tonight at 6:40. Giolito has a 5.45 ERA with a 5.88 xERA, 4.53 FIP, 4.28 xFIP. In terms of Ks per 9, walks per 9, home runs per 9, let's talk about it. 7.03 Ks per 9, 3.19 walks per 9, 1.36 home runs per 9. Ks per 9, walks per 9, not great for Giolito. And that's caused his whip to sort of skyrocket. In terms of whip, he is at 1.54, which is the highest of any point in his career. In terms of left-handed versus right-handed splits, right-handed hitters have had their fun with Giolito, hitting 333, 389, 488 with a 1.82 whip against right-handed hitters. The more interesting split for me, though, is what he's done on the road versus at Fenway. Lucas Giolito has been very good on the road and not very good at Fenway Park. Opponents are hitting 190, 250, 286 on the road versus 376, 423, and 591 at Fenway Park. His last 2 starts on the road have both been pretty brutal. 2 starts ago against the Angels, he went 1 2/3 innings, 7 earnings. These are just his last 2 starts in general. Sorry, my fault. 7 earned runs over an inning and 2/3 against the Los Angeles Angels. Not very good. Now, again, he's been better on the road, so I think that is something to watch for. And how much whiff is Giolito getting? He's not gotten a whiff at all this year. 12th percentile, 19.6%. He's also not given up a lot of hard hit. He has given up a ton of hard hit. 12th percentile in hard hit, 46.9%, and the 7th in average exit velocity at 91.7 miles an hour. Giolito's going to be mostly four-seam, changeup, slider, and these are all going to be thrown against everybody. Changeup's a little bit flatter and slower than most. It's going to be 11 miles an hour softer than the fastball. Fastball averages, I believe, 93-ish so far this year, which means it'll be up to 95, 96. And his changeup has been his best pitch. That's about 82, 83 miles an hour on average. And opponents are hitting just 227 against it. However, during that 22% when it's hit, it's been hit hard with a 568 slug against it. His four-seam, on the other hand, has been hit, but not as much slug. 0 home runs against the four-seam. Opponents just slugging 421 against it with a 355 average. Last thing on tonight is Logan Gilbert is back. Few things I'm going to look for is, well, how many pitches is he throwing? How many innings is he going? Obviously, all that. But also, what does the velocity look like at the start of an outing and the end of the outing, and comparing those 2 things. Moving on to game 2 of the series. Walker Buehler on the mound for the Boston Red Sox. This is a former, did he win a Cy Young? I believe he was close to winning a Cy Young with the Dodgers. But this is a talented pitcher. That said, he's not been very good, and he's not been good on the road. 5.01 ERA, 4.45 xERA, 5.10 FIP, 4.01 xFIP, 1.38 WHIP, 8.25 Ks per nine, 2.91 walks per nine, 1.78 home runs per nine. Left-handed hitters, right-handed hitters have both sort of done stuff against him. Right-handed hitters have not really hit, but they've slugged. Versus left-handed hitters have definitely hit him. Left-handed hitters are hitting 307 with a 433 slug. Right-handed hitters just hitting 222 with a 500 slug. Similar to Giolito, the split that you're going to want to look at is home road splits. Buehler at home has a 3.31 ERA versus on the road 7.43. Part of that is due to a couple bad starts and specifically a 7-run outing at Yankee Stadium his last time out on the road. And the time before that, he gave up 5 in Atlanta. Of his starts on the road, 3 of 5 have been poor. We'll see how that continues tomorrow night. Hopefully it does continue. Buehler so far this season has struggled to get whiff. He's in the 13th percentile. Neither of these two first guys are going to be huge whiff merchants in terms of strikeouts and stuff like that. However, Buehler has been better at limiting hard hit and average exit velocity, even though he's given up some barrels. Buehler has 7 total pitches, and they're all used about at the minimum 10% of the time, and he's going to mix it up on you. Sinker has been his best pitch, while the four-seam has not been his best pitch. Opponents are slugging 7.65 against the four-seam fastball for Walker Buehler. Lastly, let's talk about Wednesday's starter, Garrett Crochet. This is going to be a really tough matchup for the Mariners. This guy has a 2.24 ERA, 3.03 xERA, 2.73 FIP, 2.77 xFIP with a whip just slightly over 1, 10.93 Ks per nine, 2.62 walks per nine, 0.84 home runs per nine. Left-handed hitters have really, really struggled against Crochet. Well, not many have really hit against him in general. Crochet ranks 4th in FWAR in all of baseball, 2nd in the American League, 8th in ERA, 6th in the American League in ERA, 7th in Ks per nine, 14th in whip. This guy's going to throw you a ton of fastballs. He's going to say, come and get it. And for the most part, people can't. His cutter, however, has been his best pitch. Opponents are hitting 210 against it with a 2.98 slug. Sweeper has been thrown 10% of the time with a 56% strikeout rate. Game 1 and 2 are going to be crucial in the series. If you can win Game 1 and or Game 2, you're going to set yourself up, hopefully, for Game 3. You're going to more than likely, though, need to win both of those in order to get a series win because Garrett Crochet is going to be a very, very difficult pitcher to face. And hopefully you can get a good start out of Luis Castillo on Wednesday. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been episode 78 of the On the Diamond Into the Deep podcast. As always, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter at Diamond and Deep. If you're listening to this on Spotify, go get the video form on YouTube at Diamond and Deep. And if you're on YouTube, go get the audio version on wherever you get your podcasts. This has been episode 78 of the On the Diamond and Into the Deep podcast. As always, go Mariners and peace.